to see how unique your system is, allow me to compare it to what happens in other parts of the world. I can do no better in a way than to compare your constitution with that we have just adopted in the European Union. The US Constitution is 7,200 words long. I have a copy of it here, published by a Washington institute. Now, normally at this stage, my party trick is to bring out the European Constitution, but I actually couldn't bring it on the flight. I'd have gone over the weight limit. Ours is 78,000 words long. Yours is mainly concerned with the freedom of the individual. Ours is chiefly concerned with the power of the state. Your Declaration of Independence guarantees your right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. The EU's equivalent, the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms, guarantees our right to strike action, free healthcare, and affordable housing. But the real difference is in how the two documents were ratified. Your constitution came into effect following separate ratification in the 13 member states, or to be strictly accurate, in 11 of the member states, with North Carolina and Rhode Island falling into line shortly afterwards. The EU constitution, by contrast, was rejected repeatedly in referendums by 55% of French voters, by 62% of Dutch voters, by 54% of Irish voters, and then imposed anyway. Now, if you think that I am being absurd in drawing a comparison between your constitution and that of an association of states, let me refer you to the author of the European Constitution, Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, who made the comparison explicitly at the time. I was there in the drafting convention when he inaugurated it. And he said, "This is our Philadelphia moment." And he went on to compare himself to Jefferson. And where do you begin with criticizing that comparison? Why don't we start with this? Jefferson wasn't there. He was, as Giscard might have been expected to know, ambassador to Paris at the time, and not present when the Constitution was being drafted. But the real absurdity in the comparison becomes clear when you look at the intention of the two documents. The one is about the dispersal of power, the exercise of decision-making at the lowest feasible level. The other is about the centralization of power. The opening line 1 of Article 1 of the EU's foundational treaty, commits the member states to an ever closer union. It's a kind of anti-Jeffersonianism. And from that basic design flaw have stemmed almost all the problems that the European Union has suffered since. Exactly as your third president would have predicted, as he indeed did predict. This is a private letter that Jefferson wrote in 1812. Think of how aptly this applies to the European Union. Our country is too large to have all its affairs directed by a single government. Public servants at such a distance, and from under the eye of their constituents, must, from the circumstances of distance, be unable to administer and overlook all the details necessary for the good government of the citizens. And the same circumstance, by rendering detection impossible to their constituents, will invite the public agents to corruption, plunder, and waste. Is there a better description of what happens in Brussels and of why it happens in Brussels? If government becomes remote, cut off from the people it purports to speak for, concentrated in the hands of an elite, then inevitably that elite will become self-serving. Well, I'm sure that you can guess where this argument is going. I'm in Washington for one day. I was in New York this morning. I'm flying back to London after this meeting. But I found time this morning, as I always do when I visit this town, to go to the Jefferson Memorial. And it's like that scene in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Every time I'm here, I goggle reverently at your third president. And this time, as I stood there, I fancied I heard a clanking noise. Surely the shade of your third president rattling his chains as he sees what is being done to the republic that he designed. Because exactly this European model is coming. Power is being centralized. The idea of the dispersal of power of states' rights is being gradually steamrolled. And instead of the direct election of decision makers, we have a new functionariat of federal czars. Czars, for heaven's sake! I mean, of all the things, having founded this country, having raised your hands against the Lord's anointed on the basis that you're all free, you have the most authoritarian model possible.